Hello friends, and welcome to the Architecture Enthusiast and to the 1937 Paris International Exhibition, which was dedicated to art and technology in modern life. With each expo, the latest innovations, technology, and landmarks that would forever change our world were introduced. Let's take a look at some of the pavilions. The exposition was held from May 25th to November 25th, 1937 in Paris, France. In the Palais de Chail, which sat on top of the hill, both classic and modern reinforced concrete elements were used by the architects who designed the structure. The designers of the new palace were Louis Hippolyte Boileau, Jacques Carlu, and Léon Azema. There were some elements that resembled the old palace, such as the two wings shaped to form a wide arc. It was built on the foundations of the old palace. However, instead of including a central element, there is a wide esplanade in between the independent buildings. This allows room for a spectacular view of the Eiffel Tower. The Palais de Tokyo, which houses the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris, was designed by Jean-Claude Dandy, André Aubert, Paul Viard, and Marcel Dadig, who combined a reinforced concrete free plan with a column and beam slab structure within the French tradition of palace architecture. The finished pavilion, designed by Alvar Aalto, consisted of a large cubic hall, a covered gallery and exhibition rooms arranged in a grid pattern, all made of pine or birch wood, evoking the vast forests of that country. This was complemented by pergolas surrounding a garden. The visit to this pavilion revealed to the visitors the importance of the wood and paper industries in this state, the extraordinary vogue for sports and amateur theaters, the richness of the popular poetry expressed in the Kalevala, which is still recited in the evening in these thatched cottages, similar, with their sauna or finished bath, to the one reconstituted here and which contrasted with the comfortable modern Finnish flat, with its tapestries, statuettes, and decorative motifs. Fitting in the architectural master plan of the master architect Jacques Griever at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, and inspired by the shape of a grain elevator, the Canadian pavilion included Joseph-Émile Brunet's 28-foot sculpture of a buffalo, and Charles Comfort's The Romance. Paintings by Brunet, sculpted panels on the outside of the structure, and several thematic stands inside the Canadian pavilion depicted aspects of Canadian culture. The pavilion reproduced, in its shape and proportions, one of the grain stores so numerous in this country. Its architect, who was also a talented sculptor, had designed the plan and, unique in the exhibition, executed the bas-reliefs and sculptures that decorated it. On the facade, 4 aluminum motifs and 2 large paintings evoked the main regional productions. A high totem pole personified an ancient red-skinned deity. 30 stands surrounded the central hall, occupied by the major firms of flour, fruit, silk, and mineral preserves. A section was reserved for Canadian arts and crafts, woolen spinning wheels, fabrics as made by the old French Canadians. There was also a section devoted to the different provinces and another to a vast photographic and literary documentation. The Norwegian pavilion was designed by Knut Knudsen, Arne Korsmo, and Ole Lund Skistad. The facade of the Norwegian pavilion, which had 2 large wings, stood 30 meters high and was covered in aluminum. As you walked through the halls, you could see that Norway, despite its relatively small size, was one of the world's largest maritime nations and had the most modern fleet in the world, that the art of glass, silver, and ceramics was very advanced, as was the art of stained glass and wood carving. White coal, sport, and social work were the subject of other stands. One last stand was occupied by a reproduction of a typical Norwegian weekend house. The Spanish pavilion was built by the Spanish architect Josep Louis Sert. The Spanish pavilion stood on the edge of the central avenue. Its very modern appearance was enhanced by sober and judicious ornamentation. You could access, via the large staircase, an open hall which extended into a patio intended to be used as a theater. A compulsory circulation system allowed you to begin your visit to the rooms on the second floor, which housed the sections of popular architecture and crafts, painting, sculpture, engraving, and drawing. An interior staircase led to the first floor where the sections of economy, labor, popular education, and a large map of various provinces in Spain were located. A special decoration on the facade was used to display advertising for the products at the exhibition. It attracted extra attention because the exposition took place during the Spanish Civil War. The pavilion included Pablo Picasso's Guernica, the now famous depiction of the horrors of war, as well as Alexander Calder's sculpture Mercury Fountain, and Joan Mirau's painting Catalan Peasant in Revolt. The German pavilion, with its 54-meter-high tower, crowned with the Reich emblem, an eagle with a swastika, was made up of 8 steel pillars clad with fluted stone slabs and complemented by mosaic plaques. After climbing the staircase protruding from the platform on which the tower rested, you entered a single hall with a steel frame. The decoration of the walls, following a uniform plan, gave it the appearance of a festival hall. It was beautifully decorated with mosaic frescoes, tapestries, art paintings, and stained glass windows, all of which, like its monumental bronze groups, were the work of the best contemporary German artists. The hall, which had no subdivisions, floors, or other structures, was lit exclusively by the large roof window and numerous chandeliers, with no windows in the side walls. Only the rear part, slightly elevated, had a mezzanine floor where offices and the cinema room were installed. The stairs leading to the terrace began here. In this huge hall you could see, next to the models of the great constructions of the New Germany, the first-class productions of the industries of this state and especially of the different branches of the arts and crafts, of publishing and books. Everything was presented with consummate artistry and remarkable order, in accordance to the designs of architect Albert Speer. The location of the Soviet pavilion above the subway determined its proportions, 160 meters long and 21.5 meters wide. The author of the project was the chief architect of the pavilion, Boris Iofan, who was inspired by the dynamism and the creative impulse that marked the economic, cultural, and social activity of the USSR. These are the same ideas that inspired the sculptural group, Worker and Kolkhoz Woman, which crowned the pavilion. The 24.6-meter sculpture was made of stainless steel and weighed 65 tons. The facade of the pavilion was covered with marble slabs of different colors from the Urals, Central Asia, etc. On both sides of the entrance, there are properly decorated sculpture bas-relief statuary. The large door was decorated with bas-reliefs. The interior design of the pavilion was entrusted to the artist-painter Tion. The objects exhibited in the halls and rooms of the pavilion gave an overall picture of the development of art and technology in the 11 republics belonging to the Soviet Union in the 20th year of its existence. The USSR pavilion could be described as a monolithic composition of sculpture and architecture. Relatively low, its height increased towards the main facade. It was completed in the tower, which was half concrete, half metal, and covered with a rare Gascon marble completely unknown in Western Europe. Italian Pavilion Italy was vying for attention between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, who presented themselves as great and opposing forces to be reckoned with. Italy was the benevolent dictatorship, sunny, open, and Mediterranean. It was founded on discipline, order, and unity. Marcello Piacentini was given the job of designing the pavilion exterior. He used a modern reinforced concrete frame combined with traditional elements such as colonnades, terraces, courts and galleries, the tower form, classical rhythms, and the use of Mediterranean marble and stucco. The pavilion was nestled under the Eiffel Tower, looking out over the Seine to the main part of the exposition site. On a large plinth rising from the river, an imposing equestrian monument by Georges Gorey, representing the genius of fascism, stood in front of a 42-meter-high tower with superimposed architrave porticos, whose pillars supported 24 statues. This tower, dominating the central pavilion connected to a small neighboring building, was preceded by a courtyard of honor with an Italian marble floor. The gardens with their porphyry-paved paths were enlivened by 4 lithoceramic fountains. Under the portico of the courtyard, large paintings depicted the various achievements of the fascist regime, and on one wall, a winged victory. Great Britain Pavilion was a large white box, decorated externally with a painted frieze by John Skeeping. The entrance to the British Pavilion, which had a painted facade on the Seine, opened onto the Quai d'Orsay. You first entered a large hall where the specific products of the main English industries were exhibited. This hall led to gardens laid out for rest, descending to the river bank. An elliptical ramp joined the main floor to the lower floor. All around, you could see the typical rooms of a weekend house. The room on the same level housed Scottish exhibitors, weavers from Wales, while those on the upper floor, on the Quai d'Orsay level, were devoted to shooting and hunting, sports and games, leather goods, glassware, goldsmiths. Designed by Le Corbusier and Pierre Generet, hearing the announcement of the proposed expo, immediately issued an ambitious counter-proposal. When funding for his project failed to materialize, he offered several scaled-down versions, none of which attracted the necessary funding. Finally, Le Corbusier was offered a budget of 500,000 francs, with which he built a canvas pavilion filled with didascitic material promoting his utopian vision of future urbanism. The Pavillon de Temps Nouveau took the form of a huge square tent, supported by 30 outside metal guide pylons and a system of cables and steel tubes. It was intended to be dismantled and transported successively to the various cities of France. The demonstration of this veritable museum of popular education was intelligible to all and eloquently evoked the new possibilities of architecture and urban planning by means of photomontages, models, and large-scale dioramas. At the presentation for Best Pavilion, both Albert Speer for the German Pavilion and Boris Iofan for the Soviet Pavilion were awarded gold medals for their respective designs.